All right, I have 5:31, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. This meeting and all other meetings of this committee are open to the public. Proper notice has been posted and given to the press in accordance with the Wisconsin statutes, so that the citizenry may be aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. And before we get going, I'm just going to say, I'm going to give, okay, roll call.
Edwards.
Present.
Sandro. Here. Rasmussen.
Here.
We're going to give the floor to Patrick, and then we're going to have him just introduce us to our agenda and issues on the agenda tonight.
We'll get to the citizen appearances. Everybody should have access to or your own copy of the agenda. We also have the backup material for the lake. We unfortunately are crunched for time tonight. I think they triple booked these meeting rooms down here. We have the room until 7 o'clock. And we have, as you can see, after the lake topic, we have 2 other agenda items. We're going to try to limit this to an hour. On this agenda, there are no recommendations for changes to city ordinance. This is going to be a discussion. I should have said first and foremost, thank you all for coming. You're all here as representing an interest with the City of Weyauwega or the lake. So we appreciate that. This is going to be more of an open forum. I will review our ordinances real quick. You all should have the info, so I apologize. If I go over it too fast, feel free to take a look at it on the side. After I run through this real quick, we will open it up to anybody who wants to speak. So if we have that clipboard, we will run an order up on the clipboard. And then hopefully when an hour is up, I'll start to give you some notice as we get closer to an hour. If the discussion needs to continue, we can forward it to a future meeting. If there's any recommendations to be made, we will forward those to a future meeting as well. So I apologize for the time crunch. I've probably already spoken too much myself, but I'll get into a quick review of current city ordinance. So if you go through your packet's a little different than mine. So the page number 1, if you look in the lower right hand corner, there's a stamp that we put on there. It's agenda item number 4. The page numbers I referenced will be those page numbers in the lower corner. The page number 1 is a quick summary for the committee, tells them why we're here, what we're going to be talking about. If you go to page number 2, page number 2 is a picture of the signs that the Weyauwega Lake Restoration Group would like to put up at the boat launches. Basically a set of rules that they would like to see enforced on the lake now that we're in the middle of our rehabilitation. Rule number 1 was no racing or plowed oval tracks. This includes cars, trucks, snowmobiles, motorcycles, jet skis, and boats. Rule number 2 is the use of high-powered halogen lights and generators is prohibited. Number 3, suggesting a pride limit for your bag limit, not necessarily a size limit. Number 4 restricts littering, encourages the removal of weeds. Number 5 talks about who will enforce the rules. Because of the way the Lake Association is set up, they're not a lake district. If they were a lake district, you could put these rules in and enforce them. The lake group had come to us in June and talked to the city about suggesting these rules. The city should either put these rules into play or have ordinances that govern them. We ran through, I consulted with the DNR. We have representatives from the DNR here. I will skip over rule number 1. Rule number 2, basically, the city felt at the time that we have proper nuisance ordinances. If anything is too bright, anything is too loud, if there was a complaint that was generated, we should have proper nuisance ordinances to deal with that. Number 3, the DNR probably would not allow that because they set their own fishing rules. Number 4 is a common sense, try not to litter and remove weeds. We felt like we have proper nuisance ordinances to cover some of these rules. Number 1, we have general ATV and snowmobile rules, and with that, we thought that was covered under the nuisances as well. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a minute here. Those were the rules that basically drive the discussion, probably the discussion for tonight. On the bottom there, you'll notice there's a rough map. The lake itself There's a red line that runs through the eastern, I guess, third of the lake. The eastern third is considered to be in the city. Any ordinances that we have are obviously only enforceable in the city. If anything happens in the town, we would have a hard time, we would be unable to enforce that as a city. The county or the town would be the oversight for that. Going on to page number 3 is a letter that was submitted to the city. It's a letter from Ted Johnson from the DNR. He had recommended against ice racing on Lake Weyauwega. You can read the letter. It basically says that ice racing is harmful to the lake. He's recommending that against ice racing. And he notes on there it's only a recommendation. He wasn't making an official ruling to put in force right away. It's to be considered. Page number 4 basically outlines the city's nuisances, and it identifies what is a nuisance. I won't go through that. You can read that if you'd like. Page number 4, number 5 is the same. 6, 7, and 8 follows through on the city's nuisance ordinance. When you get to page number 9, this is the snowmobile and all-terrain vehicle ordinance. You will see 405-1. The city adopts state snowmobile laws as the rule of law with respect to snowmobiles, all-terrain vehicles, that type of use in the city. There are some exceptions. We made some specifications on page number 10. The only reason why that is noted, 405.3, standards of operation for these types of vehicles. This section is about use of these vehicles on the snowmobile trail. It does not specifically cover the whole lake, but there is a snowmobile trail that runs across the lake. That's important because when we get to page number 11, we have a speed limit. It talks about, again, on the designated trail, snowmobiles shall be operated at no more than 20 miles per hour, yield the right of way when traveling within 100 feet of a person. We have those ordinances in effect. We do not have an ordinance on the open water speed. Moving on to page number 12, we have adopted miscellaneous regulations, which is letter H. That basically extends our nuisance ordinances, and it covers them for snowmobile ATV use on the lake. So it says, you cannot be going at a speed that is unreasonable. You cannot endanger other people or property. You can't have loud noises. It's essentially our nuisance ordinances for this type of vehicle. Page 13, 14, those are just an extension of our snowmobile ATV ordinances. Page number 15 is a police report. We were aware of a car racing organization that wanted to plow a track on the lake. It would actually be in the town, to my understanding, and they would be racing an organized event in the town. This winter, there is a second track that straddles the city-town border. It's basically been plowed for use by snowmobiles. We're not aware that it's a formal racing event, but there have been snowmobiles out on the lake. This is a copy of a complaint. The officer had thought, when he looked at our snowmobile ordinances, no one else was on the lake. He didn't feel like anything was being violated. As I mentioned, I spoke longer than I intended to. What we'll do then is open up the floor, essentially a public hearing on the lake and the activities that are on the lake. And like I said, we'll probably shut it down after an hour, and I will run down the list. Hopefully we can get to everybody that's on this list. It looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 people. If you have a couple minutes, 3 minutes?
Let's
3 minutes per person?
do 3 minutes so that everybody gets a chance to talk that wants to.
Okay, I think what we can do is we'll run through the whole list. If you've got a couple minutes to speak, afterwards we'll have discussion if time permits. Okay, the first name would be Carl Messman.
I'm the conservation warden supervisor down in Wautoma, and mostly, we're here to answer any question about our enforcement ability. Like was mentioned on the letter, Ted Johnson, I talked to him today in the office, and it's his it's his opinion, it's not a department stance, it's just his opinion. So mostly I'm here, well, we're here to answer any questions that you have.
Jim Tolfa?
Well, I like to fish, I have a license to fish. I'm paying $6,000 property taxes to have my house on a lake. Okay, that's supposedly the privilege of living on a lake. If I put an ice shanty up in the middle, right in front of my house there, where there's a racetrack right now, that's screwing up the fishing, and they're racing around me. Where does this 20-mile-an-hour speed limit come into effect? Okay, on snowmobiles,
What,
going around in the cars
in the ordinance?
and what have you, yeah. How would that fall into play?
Well, as was stated, if you look at the ordinance, because it falls under operation on the designated snowmobile route shall be subject to the following restrictions, that's where it's 20 miles per hour.
Just on the route only?
Yeah, that's,
You could fly past your ice shanty at a high rate of speed.
an ice shanty, an ATV or snowmobile within 100 feet of a ice shanty, there's a 10 mile per hour speed limit. One thing I wanted to mention, I talked to, we've had other situations similar to this in the state, where there's a conflict as far as use of the ice, and where there is a defined use, and people have created a violation by placing an ice shanty there, where it's never been fished there before, specifically for that reason, to try and stop that activity. We are not gonna enforce that regulation.
Well, here's the thing, the ice shanty is there first, and then the track goes around.
Well, the track,
Because we've been fishing it for 50 years.
well, all I
And
can,
all of a sudden, we got a group that comes by, okay? Now, what about the Weyauwega Lake Ice Fishing Club? And we have an event, and they're taking up 2/3 of the lake. Okay. Where does this come into play? Where are my rights as a license-bearing individual here, okay? And I got a bunch of goofballs out there that don't even have a driver's license, half of them. Okay,
it's
and
not
they're half
required
tuned-
on the lake.
and they're tuned up 2 o'clock in the morning spinning donuts,
Okay.
okay?
There's two issues, and there's a constitutional right to fish,
Yes,
but preceding that by 150 years, there was a constitutional right to navigating on the ice. So if they're navigating by boat or they're navigating on the hard water, it's still navigating on the ice, and they have a right to be on the ice navigating.
understood.
So,
But where does the peace, holding the peace come into play? How do we define that gray area?
well, right now they have nuisance ordinances, of course, only enforceable within the city. So if you're talking about the track out by the bar, out in the town, you'd have to look at what their ordinance is, as far as nuisance is concerned.
Okay.
And a lot of that is subjective, and we don't enforce it, the DNR doesn't enforce
Okay,
it.
now some of these vehicles were out there last week and these were not stock pipes. Don't tell me they were stock pipes. I got stocks in my family too, okay? Everybody's strong arming here, right? I know they ain't stock pipes. I don't wanna listen to it every day. These people don't wanna listen to it. If I gotta be the guy to come out here and take the blows, let's go, because this is baloney. I got my right too.
Stock pipes on,
Stock pipes on these cars and snowmobiles.
okay.
It's ridiculous.
Well, for ATVs and snowmobiles, there is a decimal limit that can be
Yeah,
enforced.
that's what I mean.
But on the motorcycles, the trucks, the cars, that would fall under the ordinance, the nuisance ordinance, and whatever, I guess I would defer as far as the determination what reaches the nuisance level.
Then I had 3 planes in front of the house. It must be 3 years now, okay, that landed, and they were in city limits. 3 airplanes. And where does that come into safety for the rest of the people? In the city limits, I got a picture of it. God help me to find it, okay? I took the picture. Where does that come into play for safety?
When you look at, and I don't mean to cut you off, when you look at our nuisance ordinances, it specifically talks about when the public is in danger.
Airplanes
that as
in
a
danger, they
nuisance?
gotta land, they gotta take off.
Right,
Okay,
right.
this is redneck city, all right?
There are nuisances that they're broadly defined, but they're broadly defined so that, you mentioned decibels. Well, if somebody comes out and it's loud,
Yeah.
but it doesn't meet whatever that measurement is, if you're just below it, but it's still a nuisance. Our nuisance ordinance allows for that to be enforced or not, but it doesn't let us, like I said, it's broad. It leaves it up to whoever's enforcing the ordinance, what does that mean? But like I said, it can still be annoying and maybe not meet a set
Understood.
limit.
I got a motorcycle, I've been pulled
Sure.
over for loud pipes. It passed the decimeter, okay?
Sure.
I've been checked already. So, and it passed, okay?
Yeah.
So it can be annoying, but it's legal.
Sure.
I understand where you're coming from.
But, yeah, and that, it goes both ways, it's not, there's nothing to say, hey, I got you, because you meet, you go through the limit or you exceed the limit, but it also leaves us some flexibility to be able to say, look, that's loud, I don't care how loud, it's loud, I don't mean to jump in, but if we could maybe have the discussion towards the end, I just wanna make sure everybody that wants to speak gets heard, and then we can come back, if that's okay?
Sure, fine.
Okay. Good. And thank you.
Thank you.
Keith Bolter?
Yes, wasn't it years ago, they tried to have stock car racing up at the fairgrounds, and there was an ordinance made saying this is a retirement community, and, they got rejected down saying there's no stock car racing period in the city limits. Now, isn't that stock car racing, when they race, ice race out there?
Well, it's not stock car racing, and where the track is,
In the city?
that little one that's down in front of the church, I don't think there's any sanctioned races that we're aware of. But the one that we feel that's coming is in the township.
Okay.
Okay, I'm not,
No.
I don't know what ordinances, I'm sure the county's ordinances for loud noise is similar to ours, but
Well, I'm just,
that's, I don't have jurisdiction, and I can't
correct.
speak for the county board.
Now, do them people have to have insurance to cover that track all the time that it's out there?
I don't know
I
what
mean,
the rules are for the ice
Look,
racing.
look how many years, I mean, I know of two different incidences, somebody's hit that track because they don't mark it. And you go across to that night with a snowmobile, you cannot see it until you're on it. So if you're doing 80 miles an hour and you hit a wall of ice this high, it'll kill you.
I remember one injury accident
Yeah,
many, many years ago, but that's the only one I can recall.
well, I mean, guy had a brand new snowmobile, 2 days old, let a girl drive it, and she took it out there and she wound up totaling out the sled and she was in the hospital. Broken leg, broken pelvis, broken arm. Who's responsible for it? I mean, granted,
I don't know if they have to have liability insurance. I'm gonna say probably not, because
I mean, when they have the ice races in the fairgrounds, they gotta have liability insurance, don't they?
they do.
Okay, what's the difference out there?
Because
It's
you're in
county-owned
public
facility.
domain.
Pardon me?
You're in the public domain out there.
Okay.
Okay. Doug Nelson?
Yeah, I'm Doug Nelson, I am from Nelson Environmental and the environmental consultant on the project with the Lake Association. And I guess I would definitely have to say that I would recommend against the ice racing for a couple of reasons. The Lake Association is looking at restoring this lake, revegetating and providing habitat for fish and wildlife, as well as maintaining water quality. Spills of chemicals from vehicles, oil, gas, things like that can be very harmful to the aquatic community. As well as some of the emergent vegetation that they're looking at reestablishing this lake does require, during the wintertime, the more persistent vegetation tends to have stems sticking up through the ice that help exchange gases with the surface. And by knocking those down to ice level, you can actually kill the plants. So this is a situation that could be rather rough on the restoration of the lake. So for those reasons, I would definitely recommend against allowing it.
Bill Zimmer?
Well, the only thing I got to say about the whole situation is I'm against the ice racing. I fished out on Lake Weyauwega for many, many years. I'm 50 years old. I fished out there with my grandfather, I fished out there with my father. And when the ice racing first started and everything else like that, we noticed, my dad and I noticed right away, we could be out there on a Saturday, no ice racing going on or anything else like that, and we'd have fun chasing flags and catching bluegills and stuff like that. But once you start getting all that commotion and everything else like that on the ice racing, the snowmobile shooting past your shanty and everything else like that, the fish shut right down. And that's turned a lot of people off from coming to this town and fishing on that lake. And we, as the Weyauwega Lake Restoration, have sunk a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money into restoring this lake the way it used to be. And that's what we are trying to do, is we're trying to get this lake back to the way it used to be. You know, people have the tendency to forget that just a few years ago, everybody was yelling and screaming in town because of the way that pond stunk, because there were so many weeds, so much dead vegetation. How they couldn't get out there, how they couldn't fish, how they couldn't do this out there, and how they couldn't do that out there. Now, when we get a group of people together that are willing to work with the DNR is willing to work with us, we're willing to work with everybody. Now all of a sudden everybody's going, well, gee, it's not our responsibility to do anything about anything. And that's the thing that's burning me right now. There needs to be something done to take care of this so everybody can get along and everybody will work with everybody and get this situation handled and under control. There's been many times when my dad and I were out there ice fishing, or I was out there ice fishing, people would come whistling past on a snowmobile, run over your tip up and keep right on going and stuff. They don't care. They're coming across that lake at 70, 75 miles an hour. Well, how the hell are they gonna stop if you walk out of your shanty and boom, there you are, and here comes the sled at 75 miles an hour? How is somebody gonna stop that snowmobile? I sure as hell don't wanna get hit by it. I think there should be, on the whole lake, I think there should be a 20 mile, 30 mile an hour limit, that's it. None of this, okay, on the trails, you have a speed limit on the trails, but on the rest of the lake, guys, have at it, do whatever you want. I don't think that's right.
Holly Martin?
Okay, I'm gonna come at this a little differently. When they have ice racing out there, they park a minimum of 50 cars on the ice. These cars leak antifreeze, they leak gas, there's used tires, there's Christmas trees left on there. And with that many people out there and there's no restroom facilities, folks, it's going somewhere. And we have a right not to have that go into a lake that we just spent $68,000 to clean up. And there's more money coming. I think to have people who don't live in Weyauwega, who have paid, who don't have any input on this lake other than to wreck it, should not be allowed to. I think that there's something in the state statute somewhere, chapter 30, chapter 33, that says that a lake, you have the right to protect your lake when it's fragile from runoff, from noxious chemicals, and I think we ought to be looking at that. We just don't need all that stuff in there. When we took it down, the amount of garbage and junk that was in the lake from the racing, tires, other things that we just don't want to go into, that was all in a backwater. It was amazing, the amount of trash that was left. We just don't need that. That's not going to help the lake.
Thank you. Bob Van Epps?
Yes, I am looking at it pretty much from the standpoint of Ted Johnson. I really believe we have a potential for setting us way back in our efforts to restore the lake. I would correct Holly on the amount of money we spent so far. We've actually spent $124,560 on trying to restore that lake. That's a lot of money. We came by it the hard way, dollar by dollar, and it's quite an investment, and we plan on spending a lot more. We're in the process of developing a 10-year plan now, and we really, really need to look at what's happening on that lake. I'm concerned about the ice racing, but I'm also concerned about the racing period on the lake, people that are going above that speed limit. I agree with Mr. Zempel, we got a real problem on that lake, and it's not being enforced, people speeding on that lake at different times. It messes up the ice fishing. I'd like to see, something done about that. I would like to see what kind of a plan that the ice racing group would have to address the contaminant, issues, and would address the, safety issues that indeed there was no fun on the track on the lake in the off hours, the nighttime hours when they're not around. I personally witnessed in the last couple of years before the lake was drawn down when they had racing, and they were not directly responsible because they're no longer there, but the wannabes were on that oval track and they were racing every hour of the day. That has to be stopped, period. You can't have them racing at night. It's not only dangerous, but it's very disturbing to the people that live around there. The other part is the summer months. This halogen lighting has really got out of hand with people. I'm all for them spearing at night, I don't have a problem with that, but I do have a problem. I have people that live on that lake, and they have these lights shining in their windows at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. That has to be stopped, because you can't sleep. I have a problem with these activities, probably the racing, especially on Sundays. That's a day of rest. You should not be racing on a Sunday. I know a lot of people that complain to me about the racing on Sundays, and not just from the racing people, but from people doing other things on that lake, the noise levels. I believe we really have to develop a plan that will look at all these issues, and look at them correctly, and look at them long-term. And we all need to work together to do it. I mean, all of us, including the racing people. Thank you.
Jolene Nolenberg?
Okay, we are some racing people.
We're a little outnumbered right here, but.
Thank you for coming up.
We've been racing on the ice, myself personally, for about 12 years. Ice Racing Association's been there 25 years plus. We have strict rules. I wish I would've brought a copy of them here for you guys to see. The leaking of cars and everything like that. Every car that's on the ice has to have a rug underneath it to catch any drippings if there are anything. Every racer is responsible for a complete cleanup. That means shoveling up any snow, any residue that was left. We have garbage cans that we personally take the garbage back to our house. We've sometimes left it at hitching posts for Bob once in a while. We also, mark the track with Christmas trees. We do not have insurance on the track. We mark the track with Christmas trees, and when the year is done, we remove the trees. Let's see, we have about 30 or 40 people that come to this town for the entire day. Many businesses will get benefits from that. All the gas stations, several places to go and eat, grab a drink. The dairy, I know, they've made the Star Dairy. Many a times we've seen cheese curds and stuff down there. Ice floats, so it really doesn't matter how many cars you put on it. We don't have a problem with that. We were city residents ourselves, actually, my husband and I, for a lot of years. We moved out of town about 6 years ago, and we've still been coming back. We sold tickets personally for the Lake Association. I don't remember how many specifically, but I've purchased more than my fair share. Let's see. We went to a DNR meeting at the Gerald Opera House a while back about the river, and they were talking more about the river, the down end of the river. When we were talking about that, they said that we needed to wait for the ice to freeze to break off a certain plant root. I don't remember what this was, purple something, that the ice was actually gonna break it off and then let the plant die when that happened. Do you remember what that was called? But anyways, that was saying that that was actually helping the ice, the plants be removed, so, that's all I have. We're not snowmobiles. We didn't plow the track that's out there right now, that's not our track. We've always plowed right outside the hitching post, so it would have been in the township, not in the city.
Any potential for Tyler Nolenberg?
Yeah, basically same difference, I'm just speaking of the ice racers, you know, I mean, it's an organized club. And you know, as far as the concern on Sundays, I'm sorry, you know, maybe inconveniences a few people, but you know, it's winter time, your windows are closed, it's 4 hours a day, on a Sunday. And as far as all the other riprap that goes on out there, you know, when we're not out there, I can't speak for that. That's just general public enjoying the lake. Personally, I've used that lake recreationally this summer more than I have in probably my 37 years of life. I've had my pontoon boat out there at least a dozen times this year. As far as lake is concerned, I was able to take a 28-foot boat up as far as Reek Road, just up by Grubby's. So the river has really done some really awesome things. And you know what, I haven't punched any holes out there either. And the way that river channel is coming down through, that's almost in one of our corners. So maybe we'll have to relocate our track in some order, because I haven't checked out ice condition. The river has changed, the lake's gonna look great, I can't wait to see it this spring. Spending time out there on a pontoon boat, that clear water, it's a beautiful lake. And I'm glad that we're able to use it in the winter months as well as the summer months. So I wish the Lake Association the best, and you should probably be able to work with us on an ice racing. I think we're pretty organized group of people. We have trash cans out there. We go around and clean up all of our mess. We go around and clean up Cheeto bags and dead minnows and piss buckets all over by the ice fishermen. We're a pretty clean group of people. We do this voluntarily. It's a fun time. Kids go out there, flat kites, ice skating. It's a great playground for families. Stop at the local grocery store, get a box of donuts, a Sunday paper, bring the kites, get some sunshine. It's great for the whole family. Thank you.
I do not have anyone else. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay. We will move on. Item number 4. Then it's the discussion on city ordinances related to recreational activities on Lake Weyauwega. This is more discussion for the committee. I will start by saying, again, I'm sorry, I didn't have the DNR reps introduce themselves, but the city has a set of ordinances that we've gone through. The city can only enforce the ordinances that we have on the books. When we mention that we're adopting state law, the experts on state law are these gentlemen here. That's why they're here. If there are any further questions by the committee, comments, if you want to carry on discussion with
Yeah, I have a question.
people who are here, that would be.
Okay. For whoever wants to chair it, there was a reference to a state statute, we weren't sure of the citing of it, 3033, something about protecting fragile water. Could anybody shed light on clearing that up for my personal knowledge?
By the way, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Scott Kinky, I'm the water management specialist in Shawnee. And I've been involved with the Lake Weyauwega Restoration Group for quite a while. NR 102 is the surface water, water quality standards that we have in the state. And basically, paraphrasing, NR 102 says that no one can reduce the inherent water quality of the surface water, meaning we can't pollute it. I don't believe that there's anything in chapter 30 specifically as it relates to water quality. NR 107 and NR 109 are administrative codes as far as plants and removal. So, we do have administrative code, but I'm not familiar with the statute.
Okay, thank you. Scott or Jim?
Yeah, I have a question for you, gentlemen. The Weyauwega Pond, in my understanding, is a backwater for the Wapaka River, correct?
It's an opponent of it.
What we consider it officially is a flowage, which is treated like a lake, but it is a river.
What classification at trout stream does the Wapaka River have past Harewood? From the bridge down to the dam?
I don't believe the only portion of the river that is classified as trout water is class 2, and that's in the city of Wapaka.
All the way down to Harrington Road?
I don't know the exact road crossing, do you? No. But certainly from from Wapaka down to probably to the confluence of the Crystal, for sure. And further, maybe it's Harrington Road, I don't know if it's that far down or not.
So the Weyauwega Pond is considered a flowage?
A flowage.
A flowage.
Yep.
Is there a difference in considering it a flowage as compared to a lake? and the number of statutes or ordinances, call it what you may, that the state can enforce on those two different named types of waters?
No. The flowage is the same as a lake.
Yeah, as far as boating regulations and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it would be considered a lake, so as far as distance from shore for PWCs and stuff like that will be enforceable on flowage here, just like a lake.
I guess my question that I wanted to satisfy my own curiosity was what the classification of that Wapaka River was as a trout stream as well. So now I guess I understand that everything flowing through the Weyauwega Pond is not considered trout water. Thank you.
Okay, I have a potentially comment, potentially question too. We certainly have ordinances that handle traffic on the designated trails over the lake. Snowmobiles on the trails can only go 20 miles an hour. If they're traveling within 100 feet of a person, somebody fishing, they can only go about 10 miles an hour. My question would be for the gentleman from the DNR. There were some concerns raised about the quality of the water and the health of the lake, as well as noise, speed, safety. Those are things that if you're not on the trail, if you're just on the open water, the city doesn't have an ordinance to govern that. So my question would be, how would that be governed? And is there anything more that the city or the town should do or can do? If you have any comment on that. I think that's really probably the issue. We have ordinances that cover what we mentioned. We don't have it for flying around in the open water, racing informally, or having an official race. That's probably really the crux of the issue. I don't mean to state the obvious, but I think that's kind of where we're at.
The only things that the department has authority to enforce is snowmobiles and ATVs. Dirt bikes, cars, trucks, we don't have any authority over that operation or anything. But for snowmobiles and ATVs, off of the route, or even on the route, but we have enforcement on the entire lake. There's the speed is, the only speed limit on the lake essentially is as long as it's not unreasonable. And as Jeff can attest, for boating regulations on the Wolf River, unreasonable is a very subjective determination. The only hard speed limit that there is a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit at night. Outside of that, if someone is driving at 90 miles an hour, and as long as they're not within 100 feet of a shanty, or somebody that isn't on an ATV or snowmobile, as long as if it's just open water or open ice, they want to go 90 miles an hour, there really isn't a restriction that stops them from doing that. But at night there is a 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. I mentioned as far as the only other hard speed limit is when you're within the distance from the shanties, and somebody that's not on a snowmobile or an ATV. Then there's a 10-mile-per-hour speed limit. Outside of those two areas, it's, I can't say it's just run whatever you brung, but it's an unreasonable speed judgment, and like I said, it's very subjective, and the courts have come through on a number of different issues for boating, where we've actually had accidents, and they came through and said, well, that's not unreasonable. An accident occurred, but it's not wasn't an unreasonable speed. So, there really is, it would be difficult to enforce that outside of the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit at night.
And I got one more comment and maybe a question, then maybe we could get back to people who have further questions from the audience. My question would be, the way we're situated now with the city, the town, and a qualified lake association, how does that change if there is an established lake district, lake rehabilitation district, any type of lake district where they're able to set, or are they able to set strict rules that govern these types of activities?
That I can't say, but the one thing I can say is that we don't enforce ordinances. So the lake, if it's a lake district, it establishes a lake ordinance for whatever, other than slowing away for boating, because it has to go through our rule, certain rulemaking, but we don't enforce ordinances. So if whatever ordinance is they come up with, there has to be some other entity that enforces it, because the DNR doesn't enforce local ordinances. So we can enforce state laws, and if your ordinances mirror our state laws, which you've adopted, almost verbatim through most of your ordinance for snowmobiles and ATVs, us enforcing that is conducive to us enforcing state regulations. But if it's different than this, like skiing hours, we don't enforce skiing hours. That's a local ordinance. If a township wants to enforce it, they have to have their own enforcement on it.
One other question I've got, then I'm done. When we adopt state law, is the city officials, city police officers, are we then able to enforce state law on our own, or do we require the warden to show up and?
If you adopt it under ordinance, you're enforcing it under the
Okay.
ordinance, not
Okay.
state law.
We've written expired registration for boats.
But for consistency's sake, it's nice to have, for the users and also for the officers, and, to have, unless there's a really big need to have something specifically different than state law, generally it's very consistent to have them mirror each other. The good thing for ordinances is that when you write it, you get the money, rather than it going through this circuit court. So a lot of townships and cities that enforce ordinances, that's the draw for is because you get all the money.
Thank you. Discussion or go back to comments or questions from the public? We've got about 20 minutes left on the soft deadline here, so about 20 minutes in the hour, and then we have time for the other items.
I guess just as, what I'm seeing as the major issue here is that we do have the dividing line, everybody knows about the lake dividing line, the city, the town. We can't control the town any more than they can control the city. Those are two totally different baskets, and, I wish there was a better resolution on this, because I see two groups that want things to happen. They're just not coming together on it, on a lot of those issues. I commend the lake group for what they've done so far for our community and our lake. It's very important to keep our Weyauwega Lake, so to speak, open for business. I caught my first fish on it, I understand, it's important to me too. I would encourage both parties to try to cultivate a relationship to work some of this stuff out between the two parties. Because we're not gonna be able to control what the other ordinance and vice versa is, so. Thank you. Would anybody else, do you have any questions for the DNR? We have them here as a resource, or I'm very grateful that they could come tonight, so while we've got them, let's use them.
And like I said, we got about 20 minutes left in our hour that we set aside. Doing well on
Sir.
I have a question for the DNR. Are there any ordinances like the lake group is asking for on any other lake that you know of in the state?
Could you repeat that question? I'm
Any
sorry.
restrictions like the lake group is asking for on any other lake in the state?
Okay,
Similar to what they're requesting?
thank you for repeating that.
I had sent an email out to the other ward supervisors asking if they've run into the same situation. I got quite a few different replies. And what it came, some of them, there were ordinances passed for sanctioned races, and pretty much mirroring what is already being adopted by the race association to capture as much as they can. But generally what it came down to is people just found a way to coexist. Generally when situations, when they can't coexist, then a law is passed. And generally, it isn't to anybody's benefit what the law says. So if you can informally work it out, hours or moving the track or, some of the issues that are being, occurring out there aren't attributed to the race activity specifically, but people using it, and they don't have the rugs, they don't pick up the garbage and trash. But generally, that's what the responses were around the state was, we've had it happen, and it was worked out. because it's rather short-lived, you know. In the last couple of years, I mean, sometimes you don't even get it, because the ice doesn't form well, the lake was drawn down a couple of years, so it wasn't occurring, so, no, I don't know of any other place that.
There's only one situation I'm familiar with from a chapter 30 standpoint where they have specific legislation, that's a Tommy Bartlett ski show. And that's from a safety standpoint and from, you know,
That's not on the ice though.
but whether it's ice or water,
Okay.
doesn't make any difference, it's
Okay.
just the hardness of the water.
Yeah.
The issues and the laws are identical.
Identical, okay.
Yep, the rights of navigation, include, you know, everything we've discussed tonight and other things as well, including things like natural scenic beauty. But whether the water's hard or soft, the rules are the same. The rights of navigation obviously change from boating to ice skating, ice racing, ice boating, landing an airplane. Those are all rights of navigation, and the laws are applied equally to those.
I have a question.
And if you could, just state your name if you haven't spoken already too. That's up to you.
Okay.
I've
gentleman in
spoken,
the
my
back.
name's Bob Vaness, my question is, the plants that Doug Nelson brought up, the sensitivity of these plants, not just in the winter time, but in the summertime too, is there, you're telling me there's no way you can enforce an ordinance or set up some type of a system or regulation where, people can be prevented from running their boats through these new plants that we put out? It'd be very counterproductive and try to go into rehabilitate the lake any further if, these plants are gonna be destroyed before they really get started. That's first part of my question. The second part would be addressed to the DNR. How do you enforce the people going, or do you even, that are going, speeding past these people within 100 feet of their ice shanties that we know has occurred in the past and will continue to occur? Do you have somebody out on the ice, or do you just wait for a phone call?
Do you wanna answer the first one first?
Sure. We do have the ability to limit access to things, emergent vegetation. We do it on the Winnebago system with cane beds.
It would be very interesting.
We do it on the Wolf River during walleye spawning times. We have limited, and in some cases restricted access to spawning marshes. Really hasn't been tested. Most of the people, you know, the fishermen, the anglers are out there, they understand why that restricted access is there, they respect it and they don't go in there. Cane beds, we do have problems from time to time with sleds going through cane beds in the wintertime, and certainly BWCs in the summertime in cane beds, but it's rather tenuous as far as what we have for a citation that we can issue. A lot of times, in most cases, a lot of this stuff just boils down to common human decency and just kind of going, yeah, I don't like it, but I'm gonna suck it up and live with it. But we do have the ability, and refuges for duck hunting, we do have the ability to sign things off. And that's something that we could certainly work with and get some signage out there.
Because they have driven through the ducks already, harassing waterfowl, I've seen it on Weyauwega.
Yeah,
And I know the signs that are in the cane bed, you know, cane bed signs.
Well,
Patrick, excuse me.
there's a second part to the question.
Yeah, there's a second part, and then the gentleman in the back in the blue shirt is next.
I'm up then now?
Yeah, after there's a second part, there was a two-part
Right.
question.
The second part of his question, as far as enforcement of the 100-foot law. Budget 101 real quick. Our budget, as far as the warden service is concerned, is made up of numerous different funding sources. And one of the funding sources is ATV, and one of the funding sources is snowmobile. And depending on how much funding we get from any one stream, determines how many hours we can dedicate to it. And I think for snowmobile, we just got the hours allocated. I think we have 50 hours that we can work snowmobiles a year. And ATVs is less than that, I think it's 20 now. So during the wintertime, the enforcement, all snowmobile safety classes, ATV safety classes, any accident investigation and patrol time comes out of that pot. So that's, for argument's sake, 70 hours combined for ATVs and snowmobiles can be directed toward that. And each warden then, in their administrative area, patrols and enforces snowmobile regulations specifically, and if it happens right in front of them or her, they can enforce it, but specific patrol time, hopefully, because then we'd impede on other funding sources, can't be over 70 hours. So, if, a lot of times for these isolated, you know, I shouldn't say isolated, but for this situation, when we have a complaint, we can direct enforcement toward it. But if you think of like Jeff's area, he's in Fremont, he has North, Lake Poygan, part of Winnebago County, part of Washera County, part of Wapaka County. During the entire wintertime, you can direct 70 hours toward that enforcement. So if we have complaints, it's a lot easier for us to direct our enforcement there. Otherwise, it's just general patrol. And a lot of times it's for the higher use areas, more the larger trails, for registration operation and stuff, and like Poygan. So we always like complaints because it's a lot easier to direct our attention to where the problem is rather than trying to find it ourselves. But we, you know, the field wardens are the enforcement entity for that, and we do enforce it. It's just a question of us being at right place, right time, or getting good information that it occurred.
I just have a play devil's advocate here. You're talking about the weeds or the plants and ice. Is there any scientific evidence available that says that if you're going on hard water that you're harming the plants, or is that just personal recommendation, or?
I think there's a fair amount of scientific evidence.
Yeah, the plants, just like us, have to breathe, and they do that in different ways. And what happens is, cattails can tolerate, I'll use cattails because there's a few of them out there. They can tolerate a certain water depth, and that's based on nutrient uptake and being able to breathe. And the stem that comes up out of the water, that's the way they breathe. That's part of the way they transpire water and oxygen and grow. What happens is if you mow off those cattails or mow off that vegetation at the ice and it becomes covered, you can, in a sense, suffocate that rhizome or root that's down in the water. So that it's more of a suffocation standpoint than it is killing it. And it's not always effective. You're not going to kill everything. But what happens, and as we've seen with the drawdown on Lake Weyauwega, build it and they will come. You know, all of a sudden the water's gone and here comes this nice, beautiful pink flowering rush plant. Well, where the hell did that come from? Well, I was just sitting there waiting for the conditions to be right and took off. So when you lose native vegetation types like cattails, bulrush, burrweed, some you know, common emergent types of vegetation, you get other things coming in like phragmites, purple loosestrife, flowering rush. And so it is to our benefit and to everyone's benefit that we make sure that we stay out of these areas and just leave them alone. But yeah, it's a gas exchange issue that you can suffocate plants.
As a matter of fact, I've done this type of work for 30 years. What you described with the cattails, for the invasive species of cattails, we've used that for quite a long period of time as a control measure. Just simply cut it down to the ice, let it be covered with snow, and it has a huge impact on populations.
Just from I don't know exactly where this track is. I tried to see it before, and I saw the one close to town, but I didn't see the other one.
It hasn't been out there in 2 years, 3 years.
Not plowed.
Yeah, but is it out there now?
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
okay, that's why I didn't. There, I'm glad that.
No, you won't see it, sir.
But I was just wondering where this track would be in relation to emergent vegetation.
It's basically,
Can I talk?
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say that, yeah, our track's not been plowed yet, and that's a very good point to prove that people will go there and do that and mess around on a track and go out on the ice without us plowing a track. They're gonna be there regardless. The other thing is, we have, safe drivers. We've had any accidents in all the years I've been out there. Yeah, we've had some cars, you know, exchange some paint or whatever, but nobody's been hurt. And that all the ice racers out there, we're now, I mean, 25 years into this, we're a family. We've got dads and uncles and sons and daughters and brothers and sisters racing against each other. So it's just a tight-knit group.
And to answer your question as far as that track, it's usually pretty much right out in front of Bob's establishment there at the hitching post.
I'm just wondering where the emergent vegetation.
I'm gonna walk out there this weekend and see exactly where, because like I said, I boarded it quite a bit this summer, and I suspect that corners, 1 and 2 are gonna be near the river channel that was coming through, so we're gonna have to probably, make some other alternatives. But we'll definitely stay away from any vegetation, absolutely.
Can I just say one thing real quickly?
Yeah.
My name is Andy Lundin, and I'm a conservation warden out of the Green Bay area. The reason I'm here is simply because I'm transferring down to this area. I'll be working a little bit with Jeff. And I wanted to be here also just to kind of become aware of the situation, so I know nothing about it other than coming here tonight. I thought it was important to be here, but I wanted to point that out first of all for the fact that there are 3 uniforms sitting up here, and I haven't said anything for the entire meeting. With that being said, working in the Green Bay area, obviously there are lots of different users on the Bay of Green Bay and the Fox River and so on. Some of the issues that I deal with are exactly the same as this. Some of them are duck hunting related, where waterfowl hunters are accessing waterways legally, standing in front of a person's house that's not a duck hunter. It's a navigation issue, they're legally there. Another one is boats that are throwing huge wakes and creating washouts along the shoreline, and the people that live there are frustrated with that, and rightfully so. I understand that. The issues are simply that, as you've all seen tonight, it's a matter of the fact that we're talking about a water body. That's one of the hardest issues to get around, is simply the fact that the water of the state is open to everybody. If it's navigable, then people can use it. And I think, from what I've seen, your question about other ordinances and things, sure, there are other places that created ordinances and so on, but a lot of it comes down to simply trying to work together. Ms. Tolfa, I completely understand, you're saying, hey, I've been here a long time, I live along the shoreline. You're not alone in dealing with these issues. You're not alone in lights being shined in houses from loud generators and things like that. But a lot of it comes to the simple communication. And I don't know, for the racing community, if you have like a newsletter or something that you can send out, or that you have a way to communicate via email, the issues that the people in the association are having. If you have a way that you police, you talk about we lay out carpets and things like that. Do you have a proactive approach that, or a way that you actually police that, amongst yourselves, that you can show and demonstrate and communicate? Those are things that you can control. You certainly can't control the guy that at noon on Saturday decides to run his snowmobile 100 miles an hour across the lake, which you're going to have everywhere you go.
We're also talking about how big is Green Bay? How many acres is that?
The Bay of Green Bay?
10 million acres?
I'd be guessing, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're talking 200 acres
Right,
here.
right, no, I understand, sir, and I'm not.
And 5 different people trying to enjoy their sport.
Yeah.
Now hypothetically, if this racetrack would go out Tuesday, I want you guys right here, all you authority makers, tell me where I would be correct, without looking like we're looking for trouble here. Where can I put my ice hand without looking for trouble? Because I'm gonna be in the middle of one of those races. They got half the lake, so
Well,
where can I fish?
well, if they're using trucks and cars, there is no speed regulation, and that 100-foot rule doesn't
I'm
apply.
talking
to
about
them.
where can I place the shanty, in the oval, where can I go?
There isn't any restriction, actually.
That's what I was getting at, and this letter here from the officer, this was taken a little bit out of text. It looks like, it sounds like it was a revenge thing, like we're gonna sit there and put 20 ice shanties in their way to cause trouble. That wasn't true, okay? That's out of text. But I just wanna know where we can go, okay, as a licensed fisherman, okay, versus probably an unlicensed driver at 2 o'clock in the morning. That stuff, if that racing only went a couple hours, but it's 7 days a week, I'm telling you.
What?
Somebody's spinning around there all day, all night long.
Okay, excuse me, but we are gonna need to keep moving on to the other items on our
But
agenda.
of course,
We're at our hour, but I will say, we do not have a specific request in front of the committee to change any ordinances. The next item we have is a request that's come in. If anything would come into the city hall, it would be forwarded to the appropriate committee. If there's anything to be clarified, modified with city ordinance, those are the types of things that this committee can handle. Issues of state law, that's why we rely on the gentleman from the DNR. I believe, like I said, I thought it was a good de facto public hearing. I would imagine that we'll hear more on the issue, but due to time constraints, I don't mean to use that as a convenient excuse, but it's very real. had a couple other items on the agenda.
Is that line right, Patrick, with the city and the town? Is that what you got from Ian?
That's the official city border. The county has all the land records. It runs from the point, basically where your house is, or just to the west of the church, straight north. And everything considered in the east side of that line is city, everything to the west is town. Now, it does seem a little odd, like I said, I had mentioned today to someone, 2/3 of the land is city, 2/3 of the water is considered town.
But Horinger's property is now in the city,
Right,
and that does not show that.
right,
He's
How
got
does that get
peninsula
fixed?
there.
right. That is something that I have inquired with the county on how is this fixed. Now, they have also asked me how is it fixed.
Well, then we
They-
should have a
they
dotted
keep
line in
our-
there for their reference,
Right.
so they know what's going on.
Do they need to redraw the map because of the
Sure do.
annexation?
Well,
Not right.
I've requested that from them, and they were gonna get back to me on that, so. I would agree, it does seem like a goofy, lack of a better
Yeah, it's
term,
not
it's a
correct.
goofy line, so. Okay? Alright, that's all I've got.
Okay, thank you guys, everybody, for coming. I think it was a good discussion.
And continue to.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So we've been both working on this. Still in the map. Somebody else.
The new guy that came here.
I haven't been able to do that for 21 years.
Yeah, the pit trade, the pit takes?
We don't.
Okay, we are on to the discussion of front yard setbacks for corner lots. The committee brought this up, you'll remember. We had gone through a lot of the confusion. I had told you all, envision yourself as a corner lot property owner who wants to build a detached garage. And I think I was successful in getting you into a state of confusion as it relates to our city ordinances. I'm not gonna go through, it looks like there's 17 pages on this item. Page number 1 is a quick rundown of some of the recommendations that have come through. I'm gonna go through that quick, and then if you'd like to discuss this, I also have the building inspector weigh in. He is not fully on board with the recommendations I have before you, so mine is just a recommendation, and we'll get to his too. Some of the topics or concerns that we've discussed were obviously accessory buildings, detached garages. What are the building setbacks in general? We had discussed that for front yards, it's 25 feet, and the yard is to be measured from the edge of the road right away, it's not necessarily the curb. And then we've talked about corner lots, how it relates to a corner lot, and then, as I mentioned, you throw all those together, front setbacks on a corner lot as it relates to a detached garage. These are 5 recommendations that I'm putting together. You have supporting documentation in your packet. Most of that is what you had at the last meeting. But I would say the first recommendation would be to clarify, our ordinance does not let you build a detached garage in a front yard. Now, we had talked to Mr. Hilscotter, there's a property that they own that essentially has 3 front yards and almost restricts completely their ability to build a garage or an accessory building. As I ran through the city's map of the parcels, they do not have a unique parcel. There's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 properties that are essentially 3-sided corner lots, and there's one, I think, just to the southeast, across the corner, on South Mary and, you know what, I don't have the street there, on Parker. Just kitty corner there. They all have garages and accessory buildings. They were all built before your ordinances went into effect. But if they would ever look to rebuild or build a new one, they would be under our existing ordinances. So technically, every yard that butts a street is considered a front yard right now. My first recommendation is from an ordinance that was considered by the village of Thiensville, which is something that you had in your packet. from last month, and it is page number 3 in your packet, but essentially the language is to modify our ordinances or our descriptions of corner lots. And right now, our corner lot description is, it's a lot that abuts 2 or more streets, provided that the corner has an angle of 135 degrees or less. Now, a front yard, like I said, is any yard abutting a street. So every yard in a corner lot is almost a front yard. This would be the modified language. Lots having a frontage on 2 or more public streets shall be considered corner lots, which they are now, and we would designate a street or a front yard on the side of the principal structure abutting or facing a street. So essentially, whichever way the house is facing, and whichever way it looks like the front door, would be the front yard, and that makes sense. Any other yard would then be designated, and this is my own language, you can word it however you'd like, and it's copied from Thiensville. Any other yard that's not the front yard would be a street side yard on a corner lot. And the reason that that's important is because as you get into locating these buildings, you have to refer to a front, side yard, rear yard. This establishes a unique description for a side yard on your corner lot. And then it would go on to say structure and any setbacks from streets on such corner lots shall be regulated as set forth in the district where the lot is located. Residential 1 is loose, not so dense, so it's got bigger setbacks. We would put in there, you know, varying levels of setback. That basically designates a street side yard on a corner lot. Number 2 then would be modify setback requirements for all applicable zoning districts to include a setback now for the street side yard for a corner lot. Right now we have front, rear, side. So there would be a 4th one. Number 3 would be, okay, now that we're going to set a side yard on a corner lot setback, my recommendation would be that it's a minimum of 15 feet. Right now, our front yard setback is 25 feet. The reason why I say a minimum of 15, if you look in your packet, technically, our ordinances prohibit cars from parking on a sidewalk. The setback essentially would be a driveway. So if it's 15 feet, 15 feet is the driveway from a sidewalk, if it exists, to the garage. And I went through, I found 6 or 7 different makes of cars, Chevy, Ford, Dodge, Toyota, Honda, put out 5 different makes or models from each one, the small cars up to the big trucks. They're 15 to 20 feet long. So it makes sense if you would want to have a setback to allow for a vehicle to park. Some of the similar ordinances that allow for this, I have seen them reduce a 30 or a 25-foot setback, no lower than 15. Clintonville set it to 20. And then in that recommendation there, and again, I'm referencing page number 1, realistically, the amount of the setback should allow proper room for vehicles to be parked there. Now, we technically have about 10 to 12 feet of right-of-way. So from the curb to this line that we're drawing the setback is about 10 to 12 feet. If there's no sidewalk, our ordinance says you can't park any closer than 4 feet to the road. Now, that would allow maybe if you have a 15-foot setback, it gives you another 6 to 8 feet that you could hang over. The problem is, the city has the right to do work in the right-of-way, and that's why we have that right-of-way. Basically, we're drawing it off of the edge of that right-of-way. We don't want anybody to be parking into the right-of-way. If we're plowing, we don't want to be catching the back ends of cars or anything like that. That's why we have that regulation. That recommendation is a minimum of 15, maybe even 20 feet. I mean, if you've got a big truck, it's 19 feet long. That's my thinking when I suggest at least 15, maybe 20.
Now, you're talking from the center of the road,
No, this is from,
curbside? From all
if
that
you look,
way?
we'll get there.
Okay.
Number 4 then would be the language that basically prohibits anyone from building. the problem that the Hill Scotters and others have where you can't have a garage or an accessory building in a front yard. Now that we've designated a street side yard for a corner lot, I would think that we would wanna modify the language and say, it's okay to build a detached garage in your side yard. Does that make sense? Basically, for these three-sided lots, it allows them, not in their front yard to build a garage, but at least in the side or rear yard. Number 5 then is clarify in our ordinances that when we're talking setback, we're talking about from the edge of the road right of way and not from the curb. Okay, those are my recommendations. What I will tell you is, I ran this by the building inspector. He had said, what about corner lots that start building, somebody's front yard faces one way, so their side yard faces, let's just say, Main.
Okay.
Their neighbor then would have their house facing Main with a deeper setback. He's thinking, well, how does that look if the code is supposed to be uniform setback for buildings? If we reduce a side corner lot yard, we've got different rules for how close buildings can be to the road. Now, when I talked to Bob, he had said he's not in favor at all of reducing the setback. Right. What I told him was, these are the 5 recommendations I've made, these are the 5 that you've asked me to bring to you. If you would like to pass these on to the council, that's fine. If you'd like to modify them, that's fine. It's a recommendation. No matter what you do tonight, I'm going to visit with Bob and have him maybe either come to the council meeting or give you something in writing that says this is why you should or shouldn't do something. He is the building inspector like me. We read the code and then enforce it. We're technically not policy makers. But the reason I recommended this is because you asked me, look at what everybody else is doing. These things, like I mentioned here, there's other communities that are doing things that make sense. If you'd like to do all 5, that's great. If you don't wanna do any, if you wanna do 1, that's fine too. And I know, like I said, at 7,
Yeah.
we don't have the room anymore, so I apologize for speaking.
No, that's okay.
I'll cut it off.
I guess I look at it from my perspective is, does this help some of our citizens? If the answer is yes, then it's good.
And like I mentioned in December, it's really, when you look at the code, it's supposed to be for everyone in general. Now, if there's certain situations where this code is not beneficial, as it is maybe for most of us, that's when maybe the variance should be
Right.
reviewed. And that wouldn't be through you, that would be through the board of review. And again, like I said, these are my recommendations. Whatever you do tonight is a recommendation that would go to the council
Well,
and
I
be
feel-
further reviewed. you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, and I feel that this clears it up a lot, because I'm sure Doug would agree, I think it was clear as mud last month, to me anyways, there was a lot of goofy stuff in there, so.
Now, I will mention, the last page in your packet is again the map that the Hill Scotters have for where they wanna build a garage.
Right.
When we're talking setbacks, right now we've got 25 feet. What I've mentioned is, I don't see anyone that's done it lower than 15.
Right, no, it.
They're looking for about 8 or 9 feet of setback, so it's technically where they would like to locate their garage. It doesn't fit in to the setback. Having said that, it's hard to say, well, if there's, yeah,
Yeah,
those are the other lots.
yeah.
It's hard to say, but I guess, here's my question, and maybe we can have Doug speak too. If this isn't good enough, why? Because I think we've done homework saying this looks fairly decent. Now, if it's not right, there should be a reason for that. And maybe that's why, when Doug can speak too, that should be.
Yeah, Doug, you've sat here so patiently, so do you want, what would you like to say?
I understand setbacks,
Mhm.
and if there's sidewalks there, fine and dandy. If there's not a sidewalk there, are we ever gonna put a sidewalk all the way up the hill?
The other thing that's goofy too, and I'm gonna cut you off, is on their property.
Yeah.
They have sidewalk for, is it half? He's not one where they don't have it, or they do, they have
It's like half,
some,
isn't it?
Right,
yeah. Where they wanna build the garage, there is no sidewalk.
it's at the end of the sidewalk, and it's right off the end of the sidewalk that does exist there. And if you look up and down that hill, there's really not a sidewalk anywhere. Besides there's a little piece right across the road. And other than that, all the way up the hill, there isn't anything, or down the hill.
Well, I'll tell you, you know, when you talk about up the hill and that, without the sidewalks there during the summer, you look out, and it almost looks like a park. I mean, that's just my opinion.
You what?
That's just my opinion.
Looks like a park.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, when people have their grass cut and there's no sidewalk,
right.
it almost looks like, a park. One of the reasons that we bought in that area was because there wasn't any sidewalks. You know, but I guess to each your own. Some people prefer sidewalks, some people don't.
Right.
If you don't mind me jumping in, 5 of these things here, 4 of them are beneficial to people who have the problem of wanting to build a garage.
Right.
Yeah.
Number 3, probably in this instance, is if it's a minimum of 15 feet, they're looking to build closer. My question would be, do you need to build closer? And that's what the Board of Review would look at, or I'm sorry, the Board of Appeals
Right.
would say, do you need it to be closer and why? And I don't mean to say we should be setting ordinances on one case, but it's the case that's really driving the discussion, you know? It's almost, like I said, our building inspector has said, he doesn't like that at all. He thinks it should be 25 feet. I'm thinking, what I've seen is people go as low as 15 feet in this type of a development. There's a packet in there there's a piece of paper from Prairie du Sac, Thiensville, Clintonville, 15 to 20 feet is where they're at. And I don't see them going any lower than that. Now, it's up to you if you agree with these. Do you want me to go back and do more work? Like I said, whatever you do tonight is obviously a recommendation for council and it could be changed. Is there anything you want me to clarify between now and then?
I guess I personally feel that, because it's not like we're making a concrete set in stone, and I would like to see it get to full council for a recommendation, so we can have more of a discussion of other than just the 3 of us too, so. Because I feel like sometimes it's good to get stuff out of committee and into more people.
I think 1, 2, 4, and 5, I would imagine you're all good with that.
Yes, I certainly am.
Number
It's
3
that
then
three.
is, and the recommendation I have is 15 to 20. Now, I could do more work on that to say, why is it 15 to 20? The easy answer is, how long is a car?
Right.
But that only accounts for where there's a sidewalk. Now, I
Can
could
we-
do a little bit more work, I don't mean to say I didn't have time for this,
No.
but I could maybe do some more work on that, but at what point are we sort of needling really deep into this? You know what I mean?
Can we move forward with 1, 2, 4, and 5? And, I mean, I don't know what the best way to go about that is, but.
Yeah,
So what is the setback from the center of the road, how many feet out to the?
well, you can't use the word setback for that.
Okay,
When you look at the official, everybody's property, when you look at the map of what you own at the back of the sidewalk, basically. The rest of it essentially the city owns. And I mean, the one thing I didn't do in here is to clarify, technically the sidewalk and the curb there, a lot of people will think, well, that's my sidewalk and my curb there, but it's, when you get down into the legal definition of who owns every inch of property in the city has 60 feet for a road right-of-way.
so is the city gonna buy back my sidewalk that I'm paying for?
Well, we have it already. And that's definitely, that's a typical, the other thing would be, people would just say, well, I don't wanna shovel anymore, I don't wanna shovel the end of the driveway anymore. like I said, that amount of setback is up to, I don't mean to fish it out to you guys or have you guys just say, well, let's just pick a number out of the air. If you want me to do more work on that, that's, I can do that. I would like to move this towards council to get a lot of these things approved though, if you agree with most of
Yeah,
them.
I agree.
So how
And
far is the right of way? My question was,
It's 60 feet wide.
okay, so 30
Usually
feet.
when you go from the center of the road, and it changes with different roads. If you look at Emerald Street, there's that little section of Emerald up by the park that's, technically we have 60 feet there, but the road itself is only, what, 1 lane in that little area there? I called Thad about it, and I said, well, where can I get the map that says, is it 60, is 66, where is that? Basically, he said, well, we gotta rely on the county for them to say, here's the official records. Or we go out and we get the property surveyed, and then you really pinpoint who owns what. I don't know where I'm going from there, except, the parking regulations are really what I would look at. But like I said, in this case, there's some sidewalk and then there's a section where there's none. So legally, you can park where there would technically be a sidewalk,
But there isn't.
Right.
May I make a motion?
You could, yeah.
I guess I'd like to make a motion to proceed with 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Okay.
To take to council, and we can look more at cause that car thing is an issue.
I think what I would wanna do too, and because of the holidays, I just talked to Bob Underberg this afternoon.
Okay.
That's when he came in.
Okay.
Maybe I can bring him back to your committee and
Yeah.
say,
Okay.
why do you feel this or that? I mean, I can do a little bit of work, 1, 2, 4, and 5 I think are important. Not the number 3 is not important, but for
No,
this
but
project and any other like it, it's going to be an important issue. Now, is it something that you wanna be able to take up at council and revise the amount, or do you wanna hold it till, well, I guess next month, when you meet again? I know we'll meet again,
Right.
but it's up to you. Yes, sir.
I personally would like to see the committee maybe hold off and then get the inspector, building inspector.
Just on the setback amount, the other,
Yes.
you like the other language,
So
Joe?
that way, otherwise, because if you take 1, 3, and 5, or whatever you were saying, and we do that, and then all of a sudden he comes because of the other issue, then all of a sudden it raises something up that might
Okay,
not.
so you would prefer all of it as,
I would have preferred him to be here, tonight
Yeah.
to answer these questions.
Yeah.
I don't know how if that's gonna put a hinder on Doug or anything, but I just assume make sure that we have the right.
I guess I would agree, because you're not gonna be building next month anyway.
or before next month?
No,
I mean,
no, and that's why we started
right, I
3
mean,
months ago.
right, I mean, so we,
And,
And my other feeling is that I think 20 feet would be, because you take for instance, and I know he's a sportsman, but you take a 16, 18-foot boat, plus you got the front hitch of the trailer with the motor on the back, and you got the motor out,
Yeah.
you're gonna end up hanging your tongue over the sidewalk.
That's way over 20 feet.
There is no sidewalk.
Right. Well, there,
Well, yeah.
see, and that's an issue that goes back, that we gave everybody a letter way back when we redid the sidewalks. We would take out sidewalks that people did not want. And I remember we talked with your parents on that one. At the same time, your dad was doing the biggest problem was the stone wall. Trying to repair that, because some areas, the concrete goes under the stone wall. Didn't want to interrupt the wall. So we basically came to an agreement that because of the stone wall and with the appearance of the house and everything, we weren't gonna so we just agreed that if they're happy, we're happy.
we can't give up our right to a sidewalk, because at the present moment, we say, we don't want a sidewalk. We don't know that 20 years down the road, the city isn't gonna say, you know what, we've grown, we want curb gutter and sidewalks on every block. And then we'd be putting it through a garage.
Well,
No,
and the
it'd be
question,
garage
Well,
and
or you'd be so close that
right,
No, we
the
still,
big thing
you
is we're
can't give
not,
up our,
we're looking at 11 feet,
right.
It goes all the way down.
we're
to
looking
the-
at 10 feet from the sidewalk to the garage.
I'm gonna retract my
I mean-
motion, and I feel that this,
It's not like we're wanna build on top of the sidewalk.
Right, but, well, your garage right now would be, if they put a sidewalk in, it would be.
The garage right now is,
Discussion at the
is,
we gonna hold it till next
As far
month?
as the sidewalk from
You
the
wanna
ground
invite the
now.
building inspector?
yeah, then
22
we got, then we
feet.
got
It's
the
16 feet.
14 small.
It's 10 to 16 feet from the curb to that
He's
part of
who,
the sidewalk.
he's who they're
We
working
went
with
through that. I
anyway,
remember
Okay,
walking
great.
up
and
there
he
and
runs
all
into
that
these issues,
before.
so if that's what you wanna do,
That's 8 years
make,
ago,
did
10
somebody
years
make a
ago.
motion then?
I just made a motion to retract, or, I don't know.
Well, it's, and that's okay.
Because these
Yeah.
are the areas that were designated and thought were important.
So
for
then,
getting
Scott, did you make that
seniors
motion?
to
Yeah, we'll move it to my next
for
one.
kids to
Sure,
work on the
I'll make a motion
and
to
their sidewalk,
table,
and that's why we got talking about the one in front.
to table
I
this,
know we talked about the
for
one
discussion
inside.
in next month's meeting.
Great, I will second. Go ahead, Jim, you.
right now,
Please.
I could hear.
I'll second.
And you wanna
With
invite,
recommending the invite of Mr. Bob Underberg
Okay.
to clarify.
okay,
Right now, the sidewalk is 11 feet. So
Okay.
it's still 10 feet back.
you got a motion,
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
okay? And we have a minute left, the closed session's gonna be a minute,
Okay,
and then we'll be out of here,
Okay.
okay?
yeah, because this room is occupying.
Isn't that the room after this?
That's coming, right?
There is a new group, a
Okay,
RC radio-controlled airplane club that started tonight, so,
We'll find.
drones.
My son does that.
yeah.
I used to.
And if you two can stay a minute for the closed session, that would be perfect too.
Nick and Mike, can you stay?
For a minute for the closed session, and
Only a
then
minute.
that would be good. They
So-
voted to hold, don't push anything through to council. All 5 of these, you have the sheet of paper, right? All 5 of these will come back, to next month with Bob Underberg as well.
Alright, so do you typically have meetings every 4 weeks?
We will, this one, we don't have a separate,
Well, we'll set
some of
it,
them we have like the first Monday they meet, this one meets, you wanna try to set it, or should we set it? Well, it'll be set next Monday night, in 2 Mondays,
2 Mondays on the 20th.
yeah.
You called Doug before to tell him once.
I have
Okay.
I have
Has that been
called,
working out okay?
I've called, I have been late sometimes, so I will call, for sure.
Okay.
He's here tonight, which is good, so.
Yeah, so we'll make sure you know. Okay, so I would like to make a motion to move into closed session at 7 o'clock.
She's on these and they're your night.
Okay, we'll need a roll call. Edwards?
Aye.
Aye. Zandro?
Aye.
Rasmussen?
Aye.
Okay, so she works with it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna do that too.
I would kind of make sure that you aren't gonna be.
No,